Hello and welcome back to our devotion time. Today I will be reading out of the book, The Way Back to Mayberry. Today's title is Father Knows Best, and the episode title is Bringing Up Opie. Today's scripture comes from Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 through 4. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. Opie has it made. Not only does Opie live in Mayberry, but his dad is the sheriff. And that means he gets to stop by the courthouse every day after school. Compared to most boys his age, this must be a pretty big privilege. How many other kids actually get to pin up wanted posters or practice the quick draw with Deputy Fife? I bet that even emptying the trash at the courthouse seems important compared with doing chores at home. The best part, however, has to be listening to Andy. As most of us know, Andy really has a knack for telling a good story. Whether it's Beauty and the Beast or King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, Andy can always hold your attention. Yes, Opie pretty much has it made. That is, until Aunt Bee steps in. It seems Aunt Bee is unimpressed with some of the things Opie is picking up around the courthouse. Opie begins developing a vocabulary that is somewhat questionable for a boy of 6 or 7. For example, describing Otis as having a snoot full doesn't win many points with Aunt Bee. Opie is also disciplined at school for handcuffing a fellow student to a flagpole. One look at Barney, and it is pretty clear where Opie got the handcuffs in the first place. Considering all this, Aunt Bee decides that the courthouse is not a suitable environment for a young, impressionable boy like Opie. The afternoon visits would have to stop. At first, Andy tries to pretend that this policy is for Opie's own good. Andy, Barney, and even Otis agree that they are probably bad influences on the boy. Otis admits that he is the worst example, but Andy and Barney tell Otis that they all have a responsibility to Opie. Opie takes the news well enough, but he soon finds that he has a lot of time on his hands. He tries to keep busy after school by enjoying some of Aunt Bee's milk and cookies, and he even tries his hand at planting vegetables. But it just isn't the same. Planting spinach is no substitute for Jack and the Beanstalk. Eventually, Opie begins to venture out on his own. He innocently begins to kick a can down the road, and before he knows it, he is out in the country. Opie barely escapes disaster when he ventures too close to an old abandoned mine that almost caves in on him while he is standing near the entrance. Later, another kid offers Opie some apples for his kick can, and Opie happily makes the swap. After eating one too many, a tired Opie crawls up in the bed of a pickup truck and falls asleep. Unbeknownst to Opie, the owner of the truck comes out of the store and drives away. By this time, Andy and Aunt Bee are frantic. It is getting dark, and they have no idea where Opie could be. Finally, Andy receives a call and finds out that his son is okay. When Opie gets back home, Andy and Aunt Bee scold him for running away. However, when they stop and think about the events of the day, they can't remember any other time when Opie has pulled this stunt. Then it dawns on Aunt Bee. The reason Opie got into trouble was because he was left to himself. He had no guidance. There was no one there to show him the way. Aunt Bee begins to reconsider the wisdom of banning Opie from the courthouse. Sure, there were still some things around the courthouse that might not be good for Opie, but she had completely discounted the positive influences, the most important of which was his father. Without thinking, Aunt Bee had removed Opie's father from his life. What could have been more detrimental than that? Fortunately, Opie's adventure away from home makes Aunt Bee realize how important it is for the boy to spend time with his father, and with a few adjustments, Opie's visits to the courthouse are reinstated. This episode is a vivid example of how quickly a son can get lost without the direction and influence of his dad. Unlike Mayberry, our society today focuses on careers, business success, and material wealth. With all the distractions, when do we have time for the children? Are they a priority, or are they just one in a number of things we have to manage on a daily basis? Andy didn't have the perfect environment in which to raise his son, but he made time for him. Even when he had to work, Andy wanted his boy around just so they could spend some time together. It didn't matter what they were doing as long as they were together. By making this time, Andy was building the foundations of a relationship that would last a lifetime. Most people don't get it. Why do you like to go to a racetrack and watch a bunch of cars go round and round in circles? Well, there's not an easy answer. I don't know why I like it. I just do. I started following NASCAR Winston Cup racing about 6 years ago. Since then, I've had the opportunity to go to several races in such locations as Daytona Beach, Bristol, and Talladega. Talladega, the fastest of the tracks, is truly a spectacle to behold. When 43 cars pass you at speeds close to 200 miles per hour, it is a sensation that you will never get from watching the race on television. I believe everyone should attend at least one Winston Cup race. After attending a race, you will either think it is the dumbest thing you have ever seen, or, as in my case, you will be hooked. Mike and I went to the time trials at Talladega on Friday. They usually hold time trials a couple of days before the race to set the starting lineup. Mike and I had originally planned to camp at Talladega, another whole aspect to the NASCAR faithful, but we decided against it at the last minute. Since we weren't camping overnight, we were able to take Mike's little boy, Scott. Now, Scott is a fairly typical 6-year-old boy. He is full of excitement, energy, and mischief, and not necessarily in that order. We left Huntsville at 7 a.m. to arrive at the track a couple of hours later. It wasn't 10 minutes into the trip when Scott began asking, "Are we there yet?" After a quick breakfast, we continued on. Scott never seemed to be happy with the seating arrangement. We started off with Mike in the back, Scott in the front passenger seat, and me driving. Soon, Scott wanted to be in the back with his dad. Then he wanted his dad to drive and for me to be in the back with him. Then he thought we all should be in the front. This went on for a while until Mike and I decided that we should be in the front and Scott should ride in the back. After a while, we stopped at a convenience store to get some coffee. It was about 8:30 a.m., and Scott wanted ice cream. Mike and I saw no reason why Scott shouldn't have ice cream, so we got Scott some ice cream. About 3 minutes later, Scott had ice cream all over his face, his shirt, his pants, his hands, and the majority of the back seat. For some reason, Mike and I didn't see this coming. Mike cleaned him up the best he could with a plastic grocery bag, all that was available, and we continued on. We finally arrived at the track, and we all ate a brunch consisting of donuts and Sprite. At racing events such as these, there are souvenir trailers for every team and driver imaginable. Naturally, we had to see all of them. Understandably, Scott was very interested in the car sponsored by the Cartoon Network. After finding the trailer, Scott found it hard to see the merchandise from his vantage point. A very helpful retailer offered to let Scott enter the trailer and look around. Of course, Scott accepted and basically told the nice lady that he would take one of everything. At this point, Mike had to step in and alert Scott that he could only have 2 items, not the entire stock. Scott decided on a cap and a shirt, and we were on our way to watch the qualifying. To a 6-year-old, qualifying is probably about the most exciting thing in the world, that is, for about 10 minutes. Unfortunately, qualifying and practice can last a few hours. We arrived at our seats at about 11:30 a.m., and as expected, Scott was rather impressed with the cars, the noise, and the expanse of the track until about 11:45 a.m. At that point, he needed to go to the bathroom, wanted to run up and down the stairs, wanted to eat Skittles, wanted to know where Dale Earnhardt was, wanted to lie down, wanted to know when they were really going to race, and the list went on. Also, about every 3 seconds, Scott had some comment or question for me, ranging from, "Mr. Joey, there goes your favorite car," to, "Mr. Joey, did you eat all the Whoppers?" The practice and qualifying were over, and we made it back to our car. As we were fighting the traffic, I noticed something I hadn't noticed all day long. It was quiet. Nobody was saying anything. I looked back, and there was Scott, sound asleep. For the first time that day, he wasn't asking to go to the bathroom, or spilling ice cream, or screaming for our attention. The sight of him made me think that we could have left Scott at home with a babysitter and had a much more peaceful day. We wouldn't have had to worry about keeping his seatbelt buckled, or taking him to the bathroom, or how many bags of potato chips he had eaten. We wouldn't have to worry about him falling onto the racetrack, or listening to his incessant questions. However, if we hadn't taken Scott, he would have missed spending time with his dad. Sure, it would have been more convenient for Mike and me, but would it have been better for Scott? Looking back on the episode, Andy and Aunt Bee were understandably worried about the influences Opie was subjected to at the courthouse. But that wasn't the most important issue. Of more importance was the fact that Opie was actually spending time with his dad. Sure, Andy was busy and didn't have time to give his undivided attention to his son, but they were together. By spending time with Andy, Opie was able to see his dad as an example. He was able to learn. Aunt Bee was concerned about the bad habits Opie was picking up, but she forgot about the good things, like becoming a well-behaved and responsible young man. And who better to teach these things to Opie than his dad? Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time.